So hello everyone, once more. Welcome to the final guest talk series in classroom-based research, Electronic Village Online this year. So this week is the 5th week, which is the final week. We are on the verge of, finalizing the classroom-based research session online. And we're looking forward to participant outcomes. We're going to have a round of webinar later in March. It is published, advertised in our Facebook group as well as the course. And before our speaker today, Richard Smith, Mariana is going to give us some information about the major tasks we have been dealing with this final week. Over to you, Mariana.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Welcome, everyone. Again, thank you for being with us today once more. Week 5, or the final week, as Ashley mentioned, started on February the 8th and is finishing tomorrow. And during this week, we are inviting those participants who have been able to implement their exploratory research projects to share with us in our interactive space their findings. Yes, and also to tell us how they have benefited, that is, what they learned as teachers as a result of the experience, and also about their future plans. We also, as Ashley mentioned, are inviting those participants who are interested in presenting a 3-minute summary of their research projects during our final live roundup webinar on March the 21st. And we are also encouraging them to accompany their presentations with some visual material. Apart from that, as we think that you will be sharing the findings of your future research projects, we have included in our interactive space two links, a link to teachers research Facebook group where you can do it, you can share your research findings with others, and also a link to Teaching English in Large Classes site. We are also sharing with you resources which can make you think about how to share those findings with colleagues, with other people. And do not worry if you haven't finished implementing your research project yet. Contact us. We are here to assist you, to guide you. That's all for me now. And now over to you, Jamie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariana, for all and for your supporting. She's leading on EVO. Well, this is Jimmy Riojas. I am from Peru, and I'm very excited to present about Mr. Dr. Richard Smith. Richard Smith is a teacher from
Jimmy, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Ashley. Right. Well, good morning, everyone. I am Jimmy Riojas. Our special guest today is Mr. Richard Smith. Richard Smith is a professor of the University of the Working. He's a well-known historian and English language teaching, and also well-known for his work on teaching in difficult circumstances, working with teachers in Africa, Latin America, South Asia. Also, he was the coordinator of ITEL research from 2011 to 2016, leading in direction for more support for teacher research. Also, Mr. Smith set up the Champion Teacher Program in Chile, in Peru, for the British Council, and developed the exploratory action research approach there. He coordinated the Action Research Mentoring Scheme in India and Nepal. Out this experience, he wrote a handbook for exploratory action research with Paula Rebollero in 2018 and mentoring teachers to research the classroom in 2020, both available open access on the British Council website. Mr. Smith is a coordinator this EVO for 2 years, helping us research teachers facing difficult circumstances through exploratory action research. Welcome, Mr. Smith, and we give you a hand of applause. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Jimmy. It's been nice to get to know Jimmy a little bit. During the pandemic, we've had meetings online with teachers internationally, mentors of teacher research, and Jimmy has been one of the participants. It's great to see friends, be with friends like Asla. Thank you very much for inviting me, Asla, Mariana, Ruben, and good friends also, Saden. I can see many of you here, Ray, and sorry if I'm forgetting to say your name. Maria, etc. Saden, Onsoy, etc. Many of you. So it's really nice to see you. And of course, I know also that there are some of you who have not been involved with the EVO, the Electronic Village Online, which Asla and Mariana and Ruben have been leading this year. So I'm not going to assume that you have been following this wonderful course of about 5 weeks where the volunteers, many of you here are mentors for this program, all doing it in a very voluntary, free, generous spirit of wanting to help teachers around the world, because we know that teacher research can be very valuable for teachers. We know this from our own experience, and this is why I think this EVO, Electronic Village Online, gets so much energy, because I think we want to. I've been involved with it, of course, in the past. We want to share something good that we know is very practical and very, very useful. And my own involvement with teacher research has been very practical, actually. I haven't written very much about teacher research, about why we should be doing it, etc., etc. I've been doing it myself. I want to start today just by talking a little bit about why I think teacher research is important from my own experience. That's how I have come to teacher research during my career, and so that's how I want to start today, just to give a little bit of background to why I think teacher research is important and the kind of teacher research I've done in relation to my teaching. Then today I really want to use this opportunity to step back actually a little bit from the process of individual people doing teacher research, and step back and see where are we now in the field of teacher research. We have this wonderful sort of international movement, which actually Anne Burns in her talk a couple of weeks ago mentioned, compared with when she was maybe writing her books in the 1990s, especially early 2000s perhaps. She sees that there are more people now involved, it seems, around the world, in many different circumstances, not only the privileged settings of, let's say, a small language school classroom, but something I've been very involved with also is seeing how actually teacher research can be a useful thing for teachers in quite difficult circumstances of large classes, teachers who have many classes during the week, like in Chile where I worked. Teachers work up to 40 hours a week. I'm sure in some of your countries it's the same, not real hours, but classroom hours, and not only in one classroom, not only in one school, but actually having to move to other schools. Sometimes they're called taxi teachers, I heard. They have to just to make ends meet, to survive, and very difficult circumstances of sometimes not enough textbooks or resources, etc. But I have why I've in my own career been interested in teacher research is exactly because we have difficult circumstances, and I have found that in quite difficult circumstances in my career, going and trying to find out more about the situation and understand the situation better has been a very practical way to actually address and overcome the difficult circumstances that I've faced. And in my work with teachers in Latin America and India and Nepal, especially, this is how I've been promoting teacher research as something very practical, with secondary school teachers in particular. And these are not teachers who want to necessarily publish in journals. So my approach has not been a very academic approach in that respect. I want to today sort of step back and start with my own experience, but move into how the kind of teachers I mentioned can share their findings, share what they find, because we're at the end of the EVO now, and some of you have done some research, some of you will still be not yet doing it for different reasons. Some, I think in Latin America you may be on holiday, for example, still. Although I don't know if we still have holiday, do we? Because we're always so busy preparing for our online teaching and stuff. But anyway, you will have the opportunity to share your research with others, and I want to talk a little bit about how we can share our research. And I'm not going to talk about writing academic articles. I'm going to talk about other ways of sharing, which I have found teachers have responded quite well to. When I tell the teachers, oh, actually, you don't have to write an article at the end of it. You don't have to write a report at the end of it. They get quite relieved quite often, because one image that we have in our minds because of university or whatever is that if we do research, we have to write some paper. We have to write some. I could show you pictures. You know, if we Google research on Google Images, we will find lots of images of that kind of hard work side of research, which involves reading lots of journals, reading lots of articles, and then writing something at the end of it. Well, the kind of way that I've been presenting research to teachers has been to say you don't have to do that at the end, and actually you don't have to read a lot of things when you start off, because you're starting off from something that is in your own experience, not from something that is in the literature. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can share, and then a little bit, so this sort of innovative side of sharing through posters, through oral presentations, but also these days through video, and then sharing more widely through the internet, for example, and talk about how we have managed to innovate actually in this area, all of us, over the last 5 or 6 years. Then also this way that things have become more international, and I want to refer to a few events, a few conferences which have been sort of quite innovative, and talk a little bit about where do we go from here. So for you as an individual, maybe this will be an interesting opportunity for you to situate yourself within a wider movement, and I hope that I'll share a few things which are practical in some way for some of you. Now in the chat, I've just, if you're here on Zoom, I've just shared a website address. So I'm not going to use PowerPoint. I'm going to refer to a website, and you can go to this website yourselves. So I'm also going to share it on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to refer to this website, and you can look at it yourselves in your own time, and follow the links if you like, if you don't want to actually listen and watch what I'm showing. There's also a QR code there if you want to go to that. Okay, so it's going to be there on the right in case you forget what that is, what this link is. Okay, so on this page, I'm first going to start by talking a little bit about my own research as a practitioner, and there are a few links to a few things that I've written about my own teacher research. So just to start with, well, I used to teach in Japan. I taught in Japan for 13 years in high school, so then in university. And I suppose when I first went there, it was the 80s, gosh, a long time ago. I suppose that I was very keen on teaching communicative language teaching in high schools, and I was a kind of almost like a missionary for communicative language teaching, and thought that the way that Japanese teachers teach is very, very old-fashioned. But I gradually, the longer I stayed there, the more I realized actually I was being rather arrogant. And this was a kind of identity crisis for me, where in the 1990s, I started to realize actually it's not quite right that I should be going to Japan as a native speaker teacher and telling Japanese teachers who are much older and more experienced than me how they should be teaching. Anyway, I started to get involved in teaching at university as well, and in teacher training at university. But when I was teaching at the university, I was given a class which was listening. They just wanted me to teach English listening skills. By this time, I'd become quite bored with the idea of standing in front of a class with a tape recorder. In those days, it was a tape recorder, giving them a task, a pre-task, saying, listen to the tape. Okay, and now what are the answers? Okay, now let's listen again and see if you got the answers right or not. And I had this very large class, actually, of about 50 students. These students were all English majors. They needed to have listening ability, improve their listening ability. They knew that, but they also wanted many different things. They wanted to learn to speak better. They didn't necessarily always want to listen to these tapes which were provided, and that was the standard communicative way of teaching listening skills. So I was really I was really wondering what to do. I decided I would ask them what they wanted to do. First of all, outside the classroom, what could you do outside the classroom to improve your English? So I asked them to write on pieces of paper, just at the end of a class, tell me what you would like to do in class, not outside class, to improve your listening skills. And I realized they had so many different things that they needed. They knew that they wanted this, they knew that they wanted that, but they were all very different. So I was really wondering how to differentiate. Well, I decided I'd make sort of contracts with the individual students that they would set a goal, and they would then write to me and tell me what they had done outside the class. But something else was bothering me, and that was in the class itself. What should we do? So again, I decided I would trust the students because they were giving me lots of good ideas, things I'd never thought of. They wanted to go and watch the same film in English, and by the fourth time they could understand it. This was their idea. Well, I asked them, what do you want to do in the class? And they had many, many good ideas, but they were all very different ideas. So I took the step of, this was the first article here. I don't want you to go and read that now, but if you're interested, you could. It's all my sort of practitioner research at that time. I took the step of making groups, and the groups were not just in one classroom, they were all around the university. It was a very cramped, small classroom. So I had to go and talk to them and find out what they were doing. And I really had to keep very good records of what they were doing. I talked about it that I was a kind of ethnographer, a kind of explorer of a new culture, of a new way of doing things. And I would always ask them, do you want to continue, or do you want to come back and do things in a more standard way? I wanted to always give them that democratic opportunity to come back. But they always said, yes, we wanted to carry on and do this. But I found that my role had to be something like an explorer, an ethnographer. I had to be keeping good records of what they were doing, just so I could understand what was going on in this new way of teaching. So that was my first step really into, I didn't call it teacher research, I didn't call it practitioner research, I just thought that's what I have to do in this situation. That's one point I want to make. Actually, good teachers, and I think I was being a good teacher at that point, as I was trying to find new ways of teaching which would be more appropriate for my students, which were getting away from the communicative ideology. Some of them actually wanted to do very traditional things. And I said, okay, if you feel you can learn by translating, for example, what they are saying, and do that, yeah. I was happy, I was developing, it was difficult, it was hard, but it was very confusing for me. But I felt by finding out from them what they wanted, and not always giving them what they wanted, but talking back to them and saying, this is what you said, and this is what we're going to do based on what you've said. I was developing a more democratic way of doing things. I was developing myself as a teacher. I was overcoming this challenge, this difficult circumstance. Okay, let's fast forward maybe 10 years, actually. I'd moved to England in 2000, and I've been teaching there for 20 years now. And at Warwick, I don't teach English, I teach teachers. I teach students who are doing MA in TESOL. One thing, with my experience, I thought one thing we need to do, with these students who are coming from different countries around the world, where I don't know their context. I can't tell them how they should be teaching. You know, this is my realization after my years in Japan. A kind of, if you like, a kind of critical turn. It's happened, hasn't it, in ELT generally. We know that the Western methods don't work always in their imposed top-down into other contexts where they're not appropriate. And this is very much why I'm interested in teacher research, because we know from history, I like to look at history, we know from history top-down innovations just do not work generally because they don't take account of teachers' own contexts. And research doesn't have all the answers at all, by any means, for how we should teach in classrooms. I mean, let me ask you in the chat, if you like, where or who do you get your ideas from? Where do you get your ideas from? Or who do you get your ideas from? For example, in this pandemic situation, for dealing with this pandemic situation, I'd just like to ask you that question in the chat, if you don't mind. And let me see if I can see it. Would you mind just writing that in the chat? Where do you get your ideas from? Who do you get your ideas from? Oh, interesting. Other teachers. And my students, right? My colleagues, other teachers. Webinars maybe from teachers, and from researchers, I'm not sure. Maybe, Mariana. Okay, from problems, Ege says, that's interesting, unexpected problems. And then they kind of, I guess, Ege force you to think about how to deal with something for yourself. And maybe all of you are underestimating from yourself, you get ideas from yourself, don't you? From the experience. Okay, so actually it's saying from my lessons, right? And reflecting on your lessons. From webinars, practical webinars, from blogs, from teachers, adapting to what's in front of me. This is yeah. So that's what me too. I get my ideas. I've got my ideas from colleagues, from my colleagues. I don't know about you, but we've been talking together much more than we ever used to, because we're in this difficult situation. We need to find answers. I'm finding from colleagues. I'm also finding, as I want to show you in a minute, from my students giving me ideas, and the challenges and the other teachers. But nobody has said from research, right? I just want you to say that. From academic research. Nobody has said that so far, and I myself haven't been finding ideas there either. I think this is the time for us to recognize where our knowledge as teachers, our development as teachers is coming from. It's coming from one another. It's coming from our students. And I'd like to suggest that we need to celebrate that, and we need to assert that we can find solutions. We can find ideas. We don't need to depend on top-down things coming from the government. We don't need to depend on research from universities. Okay, so that's my experience too. So at Warwick, I decided to get students doing a little bit of action research, because I realized by then that what I'd been doing was a kind of exploring, trying to find out what was happening in my classrooms, plus trying to change my teaching based on what I found. And that's where I realized, Anne Burns came to Japan in the 90s, Dick Allred also, and I heard their ideas, and I thought, oh, what I'm doing is a kind of practitioner research. But as I said, I think a lot of teachers do this anyway without calling it any name. If you've ever got data from your students, if you've ever got students' reflections, then you've been doing a kind of research, actually. If you've ever got a teacher to come and observe you because you've had some issue in your classroom, then you've been doing a kind of research. I keep a very broad definition of research as where you are investigating something a little bit systematically to where you're getting data. You're not just reflecting. This is how I distinguish to teacher research from reflective practice. Reflective practice, reflecting, of course, can get us so far. We think we have an experience and we reflect on it, but it actually becomes research when you get some data, and that can give you new perspectives. And that's what I'm talking about, having got from my students. Okay, quickly, I had a so I was trying to get students to do action research in the classrooms, in the class with one another. Students liked it by the end, but they often had problems in the middle, because we were not giving them a lot of input. We were not giving them lectures. We weren't. Some of them thought we should be giving them more input. Instead, I was involving them in reflecting on their teaching, and not always telling them either what I thought, how I thought they should be teaching, but instead asking them to look at a recording of their teaching to get feedback from their students. And I wasn't telling them how they should be teaching. Some of them maybe didn't like that so much. Well, anyway, one day we got this is the second article. One day we got a letter. This is me, my colleagues Emma and Peter. We got a letter, anonymous letter, under my door of my office, and it said, "I and many other students feel that we are not getting enough input, and that you are not giving us enough. You're not providing enough for us." So that's a bit shocking, because we thought, and we knew from previous year, that it was quite a good experience for students. But we thought we'd better find out. We usually asked the students quite often to, again, give us some reflections at the end of the class. But we hadn't really been doing that enough, I think. We hadn't really understood what was going on. But I do want to recommend just this idea of getting feedback from students quite regularly at the end of a class, 5 minutes writing. These days with online teaching, we need to find a different way, perhaps. But anyway, we decided, well, we'd better see if that's true, that everybody feels the same way. So we made a little questionnaire using sentences from the letter and adding some more sentences. Now, of course, we didn't know who it was, but we so strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. And we gave that to all the students in the class. And we found actually that she was right. In fact, there was more dissatisfaction than we knew. But it was balanced by some other aspects which were positive. So we decided, oh yeah, actually we do need to make some change here. And the change we made was actually not to give them a lot more input, but instead to give a lot more support for the students through tutorials. But it helped us a lot. So it was a kind of exploration, then a kind of action, and we then got feedback again to see if it worked or not. So that's just to say that was another case in my experience where doing some research with my students helped me a lot to overcome difficulties in a very practical way. Fast forward again, I was lucky enough, by this time I was the coordinator of the research SIG, the ITEFL research SIG. And I was lucky enough to be invited to help start a program called the Champion Teachers Program. Are any of you here from that program? If you are, just say hello in the chat. But this has gone on since 2013, year after year. But at first, the very first year, this is what I wrote about the very first year. It wasn't going that well, actually, to be honest. And I wrote this later on to admit that it wasn't very well organized at the beginning. I came in a bit late. Even if I had come in earlier, I think I wouldn't have necessarily known how to organize a very good mentoring scheme. There were supposed to be 80 teachers, secondary school teachers, and there were about 4 mentors, so each one was supposed to have 20 teachers each, which was probably too many. And it was just at the wrong time. It was just before they were going to go on vacation in January. That wasn't the right time at all, because they would forget about what they'd done. Everybody had good intentions, but I think we got feedback from teachers, from mentors. We managed to rescue this program, and the way the program turned out was we had a phase which was exploring, where the teachers had questions and they were going to explore the answers to their questions. And we managed to rescue it so that they could either have another phase where they would just be exploring, or they could move into action, into some action. So I think this chapter is a kind of practitioner research from my practitioner research about how I explored this, and then how we made it better, how we took action to make it better. But just to say that, my exploration here helped to make the program better, helped in a challenging situation, just like in my previous kinds of work. And exploratory action research, that came from this experience. This chapter, it describes how it came about. And it only came about really because we were open to change. We were flexible and open to adapting it according to those difficult circumstances, because we were not coming in a very top-down way. In fact, we knew that we shouldn't do that. We knew we had to adapt and do something that would be practical, useful for teachers who are very busy. Basically, as you know, and this is what we wrote out of it, Paola and I, the handbook for exploratory action research. If you haven't been doing the EVO, and you're watching this and you're thinking, what's he talking about, all this teacher research, what's all this practitioner research, I'd recommend you go to that because that will give you an introduction. But I just wanted to say also, well, just very recently, even 2 weeks ago, I was teaching, and I got some feedback, not from students, but from my colleague. And some of the students had gone to the colleague, well, actually the program director, to suggest that I should be doing things differently. Now, this was a crisis for me. This was a problem for me, because I would have hoped that the students would come to me and tell me directly. But actually, I realized I hadn't got a good enough way of communicating with my students. And I know that many teachers these days online feel the same way as me. We just don't know what our students are thinking. We don't know what our students are feeling. We need to find better ways of getting communication from them about what they are feeling and how they are responding to what we are doing. But it is so difficult, isn't it, to get that kind of feedback. But this forced me to find a way, actually. And it was actually the same kind of complaint. Maybe I'm guilty of this, that I don't give. I'm quite reluctant to give a lot of input. I'm not teaching English, but I'm teaching these students about the history of English, the history of the English language. And most teachers, I think, are giving a lot of recorded lectures, but I like to have them discussing and doing tasks, etc., more than that. And maybe I wasn't giving enough recorded input. Actually, I know now that I wasn't, because I couldn't understand why they wanted this, but weren't watching the videos that I had made. But this forced me, and again, this is this question of difficult circumstances actually leading to teacher research, making us do teacher research. We need to do teacher research, and I made this little Moodle questionnaire, and at the end of the class, just like I used to ask for good points. I used to ask for things we can improve in the class. So I found a way to do this on Moodle, which is using the feedback part of Moodle. And so just asked, what has been the best aspects this week, or this last few weeks? What aspects would you most like to be changed? And I said, please be as clear as you can. Normally I don't give an example, right? Because if you give an example, they often write the exact thing that you write. In this case, though, I actually really wanted to know, what kind of record input do you mean? Because I've been giving some input, but you haven't been watching it. Now, I'm not going to show you their answers, because I haven't, asked the students if I can or can't. But they really wrote a lot here, and more students than I expected were saying things about this, and they wanted input where I was telling them what was going to be in the reading texts. And I'd never done lectures like that before. But I thought, okay, well, they want that so much, and I'm going to do it. And I also asked why haven't you watched the videos that I've made. I've really learned a lot from this, I must say. And I learned so much that I changed my practice immediately. So it was a kind of exploration and action almost immediately. Okay, exploratory action research. Janak Negi in Nepal, who I've worked with teachers in Nepal, he was one of the mentors in Nepal. And so they've been doing exploratory action research, but he also described how he started to think in this exploratory action research way, and in one class, he managed to do the exploration and change his action in the same class, in one class, right? So that kind of process of exploring something, not just immediately changing something, but exploring first, which we emphasize with exploratory action research. He did that in one class, and he called it hot exploratory action research, which I quite like that phrase, hot exploratory. So I think that's what I was doing. Anyway, all I can say is that I've done this myself just 2 weeks ago, and it's really improved the situation. I now have a good way of communicating with the students. So after every week I have a class, and I'm giving them a question, questions like this every week now, because I've discovered this is a good way. So what I do is I summarize their answers into categories. I put it up on Moodle for them to look at, and I write my feedback like a little essay. I say, well, I understand this, I'm going to change this, but I'm not going to change this. And they really seem to appreciate that communication channel, which we can get through doing this. Okay, so I just wanted to say, and mentoring, I'm not going to talk very much about mentoring today, although it's in the title, but from the work that I was doing in India, Nepal, this book has come out, and if you are at all interested in moving from being a teacher researcher, if you've discovered the value of doing teacher research yourselves, quite often this is what teachers are doing these days, and many of you, Mariana, Sylvia, Jimmy, from doing teacher research yourselves, you've realized you have the experience and you want to then share it with other teachers. And I think that's a very, very interesting thing that's happened over the last few years, which hadn't happened before. Because in the past, the mentor was the mentor, the expert, and we've got this happening more and more. And it's a very, very positive thing, which has meant that things have becoming more like a movement. Now, I'm going to move in just today to the topic to talk about innovative sharing, because we're at that stage now. If you may have done some teacher research and you may want to share it. Some people say you have to share it. Research means you've got to share it, but I don't really agree. For example, what I just did with my students, I'm not necessarily, I'm happy, actually I have been sharing it with you, haven't I? But it's good enough for me in a way that I've actually managed to improve my teaching through doing that teacher research. I don't think it always has to be shared, but it can be very useful for others to hear about your experience, but not necessarily through a written article, a written journal article. And I don't think many people have sort of read this article. I'm quite proud of it though, because in this article I'm sharing, I'm writing about, with Deborah and Paula and Andrea, about all the ways that we have developed which involve sharing teacher research, sharing practitioner research, but not necessarily writing a journal article. So I'm just going to go over these with you, hoping some of it might be useful and interesting for you. It starts with when I was the coordinator of the research SIG, the ITFL research SIG, and some things we did in the newsletter and also on our website. I'm going to come back to this, but it's things that we experimented with in about 2011 or 2012. I'm going to move on to talk about posters, and posters have become a frequent and very useful way of sharing, that teachers can share what they've done with others. And we can think about online posters, can't we? These days we've got to, I think, as well. The posters, and I'm going to talk about that, poster presentation, but then I'm also going to talk about how from a poster presentation, from an oral presentation, if you record it, that can be a really good starting point for writing a story, writing something which you can share in writing. And I'm going to come back to this, how we discovered this through the Champion Teachers program project. I don't know if I will come back to these pictures, but there you've got some champion teachers from the very first year presenting, and then immediately we asked them to record. We asked them to record it, and then we asked them to write exactly what they've spoken, and that can become a story, not a academic article, but something you can share in writing. So let's start with the ITFL, on the ITFL Research SIG website. When I was coordinator, we started to develop this page, and actually all of you may find this very useful and interesting, because by now this page has got lots and lots of examples of teacher research. This page is basically all the examples of teacher research writing that we could find recently. It's even got some video presentations from India, for example. And that's one way. So there's quite a variety of different ways of sharing research. More and more recently, there have been books coming out of the research. But it started with, let's say, for example, you can have a written narrative in our newsletter. You could have a video recorded presentation. This was Anna, who's now the coordinator of the research. She gave a talk at a conference. I think I or somebody video recorded it, and we just put that up onto the website. And that's something you can do. You can get someone to record yourself giving a presentation, and we've tried to do that more and more. Sandy Millen, in the very early days, she gave a PowerPoint presentation and recorded her PowerPoint, and of course you can do that inside PowerPoint. You can record yourself. That can also go onto a website. She also wrote a blog entry. So you can see these are different formats which are not journal articles, but which are doable for teachers. We also then, in the research, developed the idea of poster presentation can itself be a kind of publication, and I would really like to push this idea more. Try and persuade you that if you are mentors, that maybe if you've got a group of teachers, it's relatively easy to make a website, like with a free website with Weebly or with WordPress, where you could put your teachers' work, and you can then share it through some of the Facebook groups I'm going to show you. But in 2014, this was the first Teachers Research event. So that's in my title, Teachers Research, because it's a very special kind of thing about these events, where we don't really have main speakers. We in this case, we didn't even have a front of the room. We had posters around the room, and out of this day, it's IATEFL Day in Harrogate in Yorkshire, together with some colleagues, we made this website, and you could think about doing this. It's got a little abstract of a talk by Katie here. It's got a 3-minute video where she's presenting her poster, and it's got the poster itself. And this is where I start to talk about posters, and you can start to see how attractive and user-friendly, teacher-friendly the posters are that teachers make. So it's got a lot of presentations there, and that's something that we innovated with in making this kind of website as a kind of publication. And of course, with ASLA, we did this in 2018. So perhaps this is something you might be doing as well this year. And this is ASLA has innovated a lot with the idea of online posters. And so, for example, we click on this and we've got a poster. We click on another one. We've got quite a few actually recordings from the online webinar. And we broke it up. This is Sonica. We broke it up into separate presentations. So this is also a kind of publication, kind of sharing. If you think publication means public sharing, making public. So poster presentation can be a kind of publication, a kind of sharing. But I wanted to say also that in my experience with teachers, posters we say usually 3 minutes, and then I'll talk a little bit in a minute about the kind of event we make, but we usually say just present it for 3 minutes, and then other people will come to your poster and they will interact with you. We try to have very interactive events like that. But even that 3-minute or 5-minute presentation, if they record it on a mobile phone or on a mobile phone, and then transcribe what they have said, we've found that can be a really good step towards a written record, so a step towards further sharing via writing. Now, in the Champion Teachers program in Chile, Paula Rebiedo, she was the mentor for a teacher, Andrea, and Andrea Robles. Now, they were thinking about how are we going to present, how are we going to share what you've done, and Andrea was quite nervous about this. So they decided to record one of their mentoring dialogues, and then to listen for it, and Andrea to listen to it and write down what she had said in the dialogue. That was the start of a good idea, which really came from Paula, which was to have the teachers. We knew that the teachers would be presenting, all of them, to one another at the end of the Champion Teachers first year. We decided we were not going to tell them that they had to write a report, but they would present to one another. But Paula also got them to record their short presentations and immediately have their laptop and transcribe it, write down exactly what they had said. So that's what Andrea did, and the other teachers did. So you can actually listen to her oral presentation here. If I click on that, and you can see exactly what she wrote down just from her oral presentation here. And that became the first story in a book, which was the Champion Teachers Stories of Exploratory Action Research book. So you can see in this book, we deliberately wanted to make it a very reader-friendly book to encourage other teachers. And so if you come down, so there you see the teachers talking to their fellow teachers with posters, and they would then go to write them down here, and then refine it, then add to it, then make it better. And we helped her as well to make it better. So this was Andrea's story, which started just as her presentation, her poster presentation, but it became longer. And you may have seen this. It's an example I often give to share about what exploratory action research could be, and you can see how short it is. So that's why we kind of call it a story. Is to make it one of our watchwords is to show that research does not have to be full of jargon. And we try to bring it down to earth and show teachers how useful teacher research can be. So we end with always a reflection, and some of these reflections are really great as well and inspiring. Another one that you may have seen, I don't know, is by Mauro, the next one, and I really like his. So we have his questions, we have what he did, what he discovered, what he changed, and then reflection at the end. And for example, I often use this one. Oh, where has it gone? Let's get it back. I often use this one in workshops with teachers because I really like what he says about teacher research, and of course hearing about how valuable teacher research can be from teachers' own mouths is the best way to get others inspired. So I like this. It's important because it lights a spark. There we are. That's very much this kind of sense of being empowered through action research, through teacher research. It lights a spark. It lights a spark by making people believe that they own the changes that can be made in any learning environment. And I really do think that this is the power of teacher research. That teachers become more confident in their own abilities to find not necessarily solutions, but to understand their situations, to be more in control of their situations, to find a pathway through the darkness, through the difficulties that they have. And you've probably discovered that yourselves if you've been mentors, if you've done teacher research yourselves. Okay, so this way of sharing through posters and through writing, which is reader-friendly, has been taken forward. As you know, probably in Peru, we've got the same kind of thing of stories in Mexico. We've got even in Nepal. And Janak, as I mentioned earlier, has edited this from teachers in Nepal. So I haven't talked about the teachers in India and Nepal who've been doing teacher research. Let me just share then, for example, the story of Shova. This is Shova on the cover here, down at the bottom. Shova Shahi, her problem, her issue was disruption in her quite large class, you can see. And some students were somehow being noisy. She wasn't quite sure what the problem was. She tried many different things, but she never really managed to solve the problem. So she came into the Action Research Mentoring Scheme with this issue, and it's I have difficulties in managing a large class, and she explored it. She got a colleague to watch her class. She took notes herself. She realized the problem was actually with some of these students on the right here in the picture. The issue was that they were maybe talking to each other, and that was where the problem was. She then, now she knew what the issue was, she put into practice a couple of things. She gave them sort of extra tasks, because it wasn't they were being naughty. Sometimes it was they were looking out of the window and they were seeing things which they wanted to talk to their friend about, and other children were pointing at them because they were looking out of the window, and that's that kind of thing. She went closer to them, basically, like she is here, and she also gave them some extra responsibilities, and that did seem to improve the situation. So a very practical thing, but a very, very important thing for her. And I think now that we have stories from Nepal, it's going to be much more better and much more possible for more teachers to get involved, because there are these stories which are quite reader friendly. I think it's really important that we have these stories now to be able to inspire other teachers. Right, I'm going to talk for about 10 more minutes, if that's okay with you, Mariana Hassler.
Return.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Good.
It's
all right.
a pleasure to listen to you.
All right, I've talked about innovative sharing, new ways that we've found to share, and I think these have helped to contribute to this sense of more people being involved. And these programs, the Latin American programs, the programs in South Asia, have meant that teachers who we haven't thought that teachers in such circumstances could do teacher research. I think the image of teacher research it's for teachers in relatively privileged conditions. For teachers who have time, there's always that thing that teachers don't have time. But anyway, the approach we've developed, I think, has also helped to show that teacher research can be a practical way to overcome problems. Even if teachers don't have time, it's actually going to be useful for them in the long run to do this. And part of that has been because they've been seeing that other teachers in a similar situation to them have been benefiting from it. What about this sense of internationalness that we have these days? Look at all of us. We are all from different parts of the world. Of course, it's not just in the field of teacher research. We attend many webinars these days where we're with teachers. But I think there is this much greater sense of internationalness these days in the field of teacher research. I think it's largely come about because of development of the internet, uses of the internet, social media, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on here. These are very positive things, very good things. We hear a lot about the negative aspects of social media, but I mean, Facebook groups, for example, have been quite important in I think bringing about this internationalness. And all of these Facebook groups I'm going to mention, they're all open. Anybody can join them. You don't have to ask for membership. They're all open, and I encourage all of you to join these. So I'm going to talk about this kind of spirit of an idea, which is a name that we gave to an event in 2014 called Teachers Research. Teachers Research with exclamation mark. It's not a new name for a kind of practitioner research. Okay, it's just the name of an event. But I think I like this. Well, I came up with this name because it conveys the idea that people think that teachers can't do any research, but actually teachers research. It's not just academics who research. Teachers research as well, and look at them researching. Look at how they're doing what they're doing, and look at how they're taking things into their own hands and finding value in that. So it's a kind of a little bit subversive or assertive, really. But it's I talk about it here as a spirit or concept. Oh, I must say, of course, this isn't new. Teacher research is not new. And there was a series of conferences called Teachers Develop, Teachers Research. Teachers Develop, Teachers Research. which the IETFL Research League used to run, but it had stopped. And there are teachers we have to remember, like Melba Cardenas, Libia Cardenas in Colombia, Ines Miller in Brazil, who've been doing this for many years with groups of teachers. Rama Matthew in India, Wang Chang in China, a friend of mine, Flavia Vieira, and Maria Alfredo Moreira in Portugal. These teacher educators who've seen the value of teacher research, and teachers in Japan as well, and in other places around the world. But I think what we have now is a greater sense of connectedness together. Anyway, something we wanted to do in 2014 was provide an event where teachers could come, present, share their research, and that's what we did. It was on the 1st of April 2014. And that was what I showed you earlier with we put it together, this multimedia website I showed you earlier as a record of it, but it didn't stop there. We then moved to put together a book, and it's this book that I'm showing you. This is just the introduction. So we put together a book of the presentations, but we also moved into organising some larger conferences, international conferences, which we called Teachers Research. And I'm going to show you a few videos or pictures of these, because they were, for me, fantastic events. The spirit of them was that we put teachers at the centre. Some of the best ones had no expert speakers. Chile, for example, on stage was some of the champion teachers, actually. And some of from another program, which Sylvia and Mariana were part of, they were on the stage. You were there, weren't you? Yes. Anybody else? Yeah. Anybody else there? This was, but mainly this was teachers with posters in different rooms, and they would each have 3 minutes to talk about it. And then most of the conference was people talking with them about their work, and this was the whole spirit of the conference.
It was a wonderful experience, Richard.
That's great. And some of you, I know, some of you were inspired by the Argentina one to set up the APIBA Teacher Research SIG, I think. So we've got a little bit of video of that. I know that you can't hear this, but it doesn't matter. You can just see some of the spirit of the event. So there was a little bit of talk from the front, but basically it was quite devolved. Now, we also, I must say, Kenan Dikilitash, who's talked to you, he set up this group, and me. Oh, there's Kenan. Oh, that's us, is it? Maybe. I don't know. Teachers Research, you're very, very, I encourage you strongly to join this group, all of you, because we often share video here, don't we, of different teachers. And that's a video actually from one of the Turkey conferences. And we used to try to live stream actually onto Facebook. We were quite pioneering, I think, in trying to live stream some of the poster sessions. Right. The next thing, of course, and so they were international conferences in a kind of innovative way. Another one was the TESOL EVO, and this is Asla and Kenan, who's really been pioneering in this over these years, maybe 5 years now, isn't it? I think this really brought people together internationally. Perhaps was the most pioneering thing that has brought people together. It's a 5-week series of sessions for teachers who are new to teacher research, and all of you mentors as well who've volunteered to be part of this. And there's a link to the website, link to the Facebook group for that. In 2017, there seemed to be a lot of things going on in different parts of the world. So I thought that we should try to bring them together just under one umbrella, and we invented the name International Festival of Teacher Research in ELT. You can see from the website here there were quite a few events, and you can see how they were all brought together under this umbrella. So this is where I think we get a sense of a kind of international movement, things happening. For example, just to show a little bit again from South America, from South Asia. This is Sandeep, just talking about his research. That's Amal Padwad in the background. He's one of the leaders in India. And this is outside. A mela means like a festival. So it's like a festival of teacher research. And you can see the kind of spirit of teachers' research living on here. And okay, so that's just to give you a flavour of that. There are lots more links that you can go to get some ideas here. I should also say this idea of using posters, it's not my idea, or it's not our idea, it's been around. Dick Allwright, for example, has used these for exploratory research events. You can see a link there to Brazil, where they've used these for many, many years. But we like this way of doing things. There's been an EVO, TESOL EVO on mentoring teacher research, which I led with Seren 2M last year. We didn't have one this year, but we probably might have one again next year. So if you're thinking of getting into mentoring, that's something for you to watch out for. And finally, I want to just say, we want to bring some hope into our lives again for 2021, and we are planning with many of you here to have a kind of repeat of the International Festival of Teacher Research in ELT in this year. And so I suppose this talk is part of it. With Asla and others, we're talking about what can we do. So this is not the end of everything. This is the kind of beginning. We'd like to plan some more events for everybody. We'd like to work towards maybe having an online conference towards the end of the year. And we'll be sharing through the Twitter feed, sharing through the different Facebook groups, new events where we can all come together even more in the future. So I'm going to stop there. I hope it's been interesting for you, and just to give a little bit of context and some of the things that we've been doing over the years. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Richard. I really think that considering publication, in different innovative forms as a way of publicly sharing, fascinating. I think it is very, powerful and visual. Thanks a lot for showing all these possibilities to us. And I think there are some questions from the participants to you. Can we have the questions, Esther, maybe from the Facebook participants?
Okay. Yes, Ashley, there's a question here for Richard, and it says here, Sandeep asks, you have mentioned others can get benefited by the sharing of research. Is there any benefit for researcher himself or herself sharing research academically?
Well, is that Sandeep? Was it Sandeep? Yes.
Yes, Sandeep.
Yes. Thanks for your question, Sandeep. Until you said that very last word, academically, I was thinking I knew what my answer would be. Okay, so let me answer first without the last word, academically, and then I'll try to answer with the word. Sharing, for example, through the posters, through talking, as you saw some of those teachers doing, it seems to have a lot of benefit, and this is not just me guessing this, or we've found out from teachers that it's part of a journey of empowerment. I think actually Gary talked about a kind of shift of identity that goes on when teachers engage in teacher research, and it's a kind of journey.
Yes.
There are different stages, and it's a sense of becoming more empowered, more confident. I know we use the word empowered a lot, but I like that word. I don't see why we shouldn't use it just because it's maybe overused. I think this is how teachers start to feel. They start to feel more confident in their classrooms, that they can I avoid the word solve problems, but that they can understand what's going on. They can have a sense of control over what is going on better, which can lead to improvement in situations. But also outside. So they start to share, maybe in these schemes like Champion Teachers or the ARMS program, they start to share in a smaller, relatively small group, maybe of the 8 or 10 teachers who are being mentored. They share, they practice, they share it together. They do it again in a more public event, and they are getting confidence as something new. Not just as I don't mean just in any bad way, but not only as, let's say, not only as teachers, but as something new, which is somebody who can share to others something that they are expert about. They are expert in what they're now expert about their classroom. They know they have something important to share with others, and that can be that we've seen this with many of you, that you've become through that process. You've gone through different stages, and you've become somebody who feels that they have something more to offer outside your own classroom, that you want to then maybe go and help other teachers and maybe become teacher trainers. This can happen. So I think it's a step on the way. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a teacher in your classroom, but it can give you a greater sense of confidence, which can take you in new directions, let's say. I mean, let's think of some of those teachers, those champion teachers. I think all those teachers, Sylvia and Mariana, you were up on the stage at the conference. You were plenary speakers, weren't you? So there you were. You'd never done that before. How did you feel?
Okay, Richard, in Chile and in Argentina, yes, we were on the stage and it was fantastic. And then we were surrounded by other teachers who were interested in the research projects we had carried out. And it was even more interesting, that exchange of ideas between the teachers around us, asking questions and us telling them what we had done. So it was a fantastic experience.
And I think the atmosphere, because it's a conference of teachers, it's not an academic conference. The atmosphere is very mutually supportive. Everybody's supporting one another. This is why these were very joyful events, really. I'm afraid to say that sometimes at academic conferences, people are there to kind of find things to criticize, find things to say, well, that's not quite right, I think this, etc., etc. So it's not that atmosphere. So I think, well, now, is there value in sharing academic, in then maybe going on and writing a journal article? I think one thing I didn't mention is a lot of these things are open access. These things we put up on the internet, these are open for everybody. One problem with academic articles is very few people can read them because they are in journals. Of course, you can try and publish in an open access journal. There is value to people in moving on in their careers. If they are at university, of course, I understand that. Or if they're doing a PhD, then they need to write in a particular way. But that's just not what I've been talking about today, and it's not where my interest lies, really. But I mean, I'm not saying that's wrong, and I recognise that is very important for many university teachers in particular. But I've been working mainly with secondary school teachers, for whom it's not usually important.
Thank you, Richard. Exie asks 2 questions, and she says, how do you evaluate the place of line-by-line analysis of 15-minute mini lessons as a means of reflection? Do we need to engage ourselves with conversation analytic study in this process? Over to you.
Actually, is it actually?
Yes, actually.
Yeah. Well, so I'm not quite. So the way that you gather data, or the kind of data that you get, it should come from the kind of question that you ask. So if the question that is in your mind means that kind of data will be useful. In other words, I think what she is saying is recording her class.
I guess so.
Transcribing her class, Okay, she said she talked about many lines of data. To start with, that could, if you're okay. Let's take an imaginary scenario. I would ask Ekshiba, I can't see her there, but let's say, for example, that you are interested in the way that you give instructions, and you realize that the way that students are not listening to your instructions, so you think maybe there's something wrong with the way I give my instructions. So my question is, one question is, how do I give instructions at the moment? And maybe another question could be, how do students respond to my instructions? Okay, so you really do need to record yourself in that case. If possible, if you've got time, I'm talking about busy teachers, I'm talking about yourselves. If you are busy, very, very busy, do you have time to write down everything? Maybe you don't have time to write down the whole class, but you're interested in instructions, so why not listen and write down just the times that you ask instructions. What do you say? What's the actual words that you use? That could be very useful. But then you also want to know how do students react. So maybe you've got somebody observing your class to tell you how they react, and you can put those two things together, perhaps. That's going to be very useful. You see, it sounds to me like maybe actually is doing it in an academic context where she has to do it for her degree, where they are recommending that they use a kind of a particular way of analysis for a particular reason. So, but I don't think for a very busy teacher that's feasible, really, because they won't know what is conversation analysis, but they can still do something very useful, which is to write down the questions and to maybe think about or reflect about the questions. Maybe have somebody else look at the questions and tell them if they think they're clear or not. Maybe ask the students about those questions, but you can show it to them. Perhaps, that could be something very useful and practical. So I can't really tell unless, we know the actual context for the research.
Context. Great. Ashley, may I read one more question from the chat box?
Yeah, let's have the final question.
Perfect. Berga says, my question is, a part of the handbooks that you publish, where else can we publish our EAR results? I mean, it is possible to publish in any academic indexing magazine? Thank you, Richard.
Okay, so again, we come to the question of academic publishing, academic writing, because you talked about index-linked journal.
Yeah.
So I'm not really here to talk about that today. What I've been talking about is the kind of sharing which doesn't require that. Because to be honest, how many people will read such articles? That's one question. Who do you want to read your article? Who do you want to read? Who do you want to influence? Why do you want to do it? These are the questions you have to ask. And I'm thinking really today of teacher research as something very practical for teachers, which can help other teachers. If other teachers read about it or hear about it, they can be inspired by it for very practical reasons. That's why I started in a very practical way, just showing that I'm not coming at this myself personally from an academic perspective, even though I am an academic. But I don't really write about teacher research in an academic way. I write about history of language teaching in an academic way. So the things I've been doing are quite practical. So let me say this quite strongly. I don't think necessarily many people will read such articles, unfortunately, because teachers don't tend to read journal articles. And academics may look down a little bit on practitioner research, on teacher research, unless you find a way of relating your research to some general issue, which is an academically important issue. And I think academics should be reading teachers' reports. I think they should be reading the Champion Teachers Report. I think academics should be watching the videos. I really do think they should be learning much more from teachers, how they teach listening, for example, or what problems they face in teaching listening. Unfortunately, they're not usually. Unfortunately, there's not enough academic researchers doing research together with teachers. That's a big problem, a big issue. but I do recognise that many of you feel that you need to publish for academic reasons, for your promotion prospects, for getting jobs in universities, or because you are in universities and you need to do that. Well, I would say to get published in a journal, usually your article is it's necessary to link it in some way to some wider issue. I don't think that teacher research just in itself generally will get you published, because generally academic articles need to be related to a wider field. But the kind of teacher research I've been talking about comes from a particular issue in your classroom. This is a general problem with getting teacher research published. But you can relate it, like I related what I did, because I wanted to write about what I was doing in relation to autonomy, because I was involved with learner autonomy. That's why the first two things, I think, are framed in terms of a contribution to what is autonomy, or how can we develop autonomy in a general way. Now, I run a journal called ELTED, English Language Teacher Education and Development. I'll share it with you. Although it's not index linked, because it's I put it in the chat. It's www.elted.net, elted.net. We encourage teachers to contribute reflections. We want to encourage various kinds of writing, not just standard academic journal articles. But it's not index linked. Okay, if you need that, that means that it's a particular kind of journal which gives you points in certain countries. That's required. Another one would be the IATEFL Research SIG newsletter called ELT Research, and that's resig.iatefl.org. You can find back copies of that there. Well, they will welcome short reports of teacher research, but it's not index linked. It's not an academic journal. These days, you will find more. I think you will find more reports of teacher research in, for example, ELT Journal. But that's a very prestigious journal, and you'll need to find a way of relating your research to a broader issue, I think.
Thank you very much for your enlightening talk, Richard, and for being so kind, as always. Thank you.
It's been very nice to be with you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. I would like to extend my thanks to a couple of people. So thank you, all the participants, for joining us tonight in the final talk of, classroom-based research EVO. And here's my reaction to you. Round of applause. Thanks for joining us. And I would like to thank our speaker, Richard Smith. And here's another reaction for you. Thank you, Richard. You're great.
Thank you very much.
And then in this classroom-based research this year, it was a record-breaking year, basically. We had over 800 participants registering for the course. Not everyone was, with us all through the stages of the course, but we hope that they would go back and visit the, sources, online sources, activities, because I think we all together, we were able to curate a lot of resources for them. And we were a group of 14 people. We also learned a lot about being and becoming an online mentor of teacher research. This was such an invaluable experience. And I would like to thank the moderators, Pınar Ayber, Erkan Arkın, Ayşegül Şallı, Sandip Kumfel, Pilar Martinez, Sidney Martin Mota, Ana Maria Otero, Jimmy Ronald Riojas, Silvia Severino, Esther Vasquez, and Ece Sevgi Bole. My reaction to you. Woohoo! You rock and roll. Ladies and gents, thank you so very much. And we hope that we can meet you in the final round of webinar in which the participants will be taking the floor. This time, hopefully we will be fortunate enough to listen to their stories. And we hope that it would be a nice venue, an online venue for professional development of all of us. And we're looking forward to listening to them. I hope that the research plans and maybe preliminary findings will be ready for the webinar in 21st of March. So time to say goodbye. Thank you all. It was such a nice online journey. And my partners in crime, Ruben Mazai and Mariana Serra. And here's my reaction for you, of course. Thank you. Take care. And, I hope you join us in teacher research in different venues from now on.
Thank you, Asli, for being with us all the time. And thank you. I would like to thank also our team of moderators for supporting us, for volunteering and helping all the time. Thank you, Ruben, for being always with me, answering mails, answering everything.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you. Good night, and then good morning, good evening, because it all happens at the same time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so long, so long.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Asli. Somebody's time. Thank you.